Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Forest rangers are some of the bravest people in the world, and today I'm going to tell you why. Many of them have experienced and witnessed terrifying and unbelievable events. Yet despite facing these horrifying situations, they stand firm because it's their duty and responsibility. In today's video, Rainy Diaries will share with you true horror stories from courageous forest rangers. Join us as we delve into these chilling tales and feel the bravery of these incredible individuals. The Ranger's Perilous Escape. My name is David Miller, a ranger with many years of experience patrolling this vast and dangerous forest. That afternoon, the sky suddenly darkened unnaturally as black clouds gathered on the horizon, signaling an impending storm. A sense of unease and foreboding weighed heavily on my mind. Cautiously, I decided to head back to my off-road vehicle, hoping to avoid the downpour. I hurried towards the vehicle as raindrops began to fall lightly on my shoulders. However, when I tried to start the engine, it only sputtered and failed to turn over. I popped the hood and inspected the engine under the increasingly heavy rain. Cold rainwater ran down my face and shoulders, fogging my glasses, but I focused intently. I quickly identified wet electrical wires and a few components that needed tightening. Anxiety and fear crept in, but I knew I had to stay calm. After some effort, I managed to fix the problem and the engine roared to life. I jumped into the vehicle and started driving, but an ominous feeling lingered. As I drove through a soft ground area, the vehicle began to wobble. The torrential rain had loosened the soil on the nearby hills, triggering a sudden landslide. Within seconds, mud and rocks cascaded down, burying my vehicle and trapping me in darkness. All light from outside was cut off completely, leaving only the sounds of the pounding rain and the rumble of the landslide. The air grew stifling, and a sense of suffocation and panic set in. Realizing I had to act quickly if I wanted to survive, I reached for the radio and called for help, my voice trembling. "This is David. I'm trapped in the soft ground area near the hills. Need urgent assistance." My colleague's voice crackled through the radio, filled with concern. "We received your signal, but there's no one on shift right now. We'll get to you as soon as possible, but it will take at least 30 minutes. Hearing this, I knew I couldn't wait that long. The air inside the vehicle was becoming increasingly suffocating and low on oxygen. Panic began to set in, but survival instincts quickly took over. I checked my body for injuries, finding none. I rummaged through the back of the vehicle and found an emergency kit, including a shovel and a flashlight. Turning on the flashlight, its dim light helped me see better in the darkness. I started digging, bit by bit, from the side of the vehicle. The process was exhausting and took every ounce of my strength, but I couldn't give up. I worked steadily, using both my legs and hands to push the mud and rocks out. Each passing second felt like an eternity, and with every heartbeat, I felt closer to death. Each scoop of mud drained my energy further. The sound of the rain and the rumble of the landslide outside were like death knells, but I refused to surrender. The suffocating feeling grew stronger, and my head began to spin from lack of oxygen. I knew I didn't have much left. After nearly an hour, a faint light broke through the layers of mud and rocks, signaling that I was close to breaking free. Hope surged within me. A terrifying encounter in the rain. My name is David Miller, a ranger who has been dedicated to this job for over 20 years. I work at Yellowstone National Park, a place rich in biodiversity and home to many wild animals. I love the forest, love the job of protecting nature and wildlife, but perhaps I will never forget the horrific event that occurred one rainy afternoon. That day, I was assigned to patrol the northern area of the park, where wildlife frequently appeared. The sky began to pour rain heavily as I was in the middle of a long, deserted trail. The rain fell like a torrent, and the wind howled through the leaves, creating a fierce and frightening natural symphony. I hurried to find shelter, hoping not to get so soaked that I'd have to turn back early. My eyes scanned the dense foliage, trying to find a cave or a large bush big enough to shield me. As I stepped into a more open area, I suddenly locked eyes with a sight that made my heart sink. Under a large canopy, a mountain lion lay, its cold blue eyes staring intently at me. Beside it were 3 cubs nursing from their mother. At that moment, I realized I had inadvertently intruded into its territory, and that meant I was in real danger. Without much time to think, I began to slowly back away, trying not to make any movements that might provoke the lion. But it seemed to sense a threat to its cubs. A terrifying roar echoed, and in the blink of an eye, it charged at me with astonishing speed. In my panic, I recalled the skills I had learned over the years. I knew that running was futile and would only make things worse. I stood my ground, raised my arms, and tried to make myself look larger. The lion paused for a moment, its eyes never leaving me, growling menacingly. I continued to back away slowly, never taking my eyes off it. Each step felt like it stretched into eternity, cold sweat running down my back despite the rain. But the lion did not retreat. It advanced steadily, its eyes blazing. In a moment of desperation, I grabbed a large branch nearby and held it up in front of me like a weapon. The lion pounced on me, and I used the branch to fend it off, feeling the immense power of the animal. The struggle lasted only a few minutes, but felt endless. I used all my strength, trying to keep a distance and protect myself. With my extensive ranger experience, I knew I had to remain calm and not show any weakness in front of the lion. I kept swinging the branch and shouting to try to intimidate it, creating the illusion that I was a formidable threat. My determination and experience in dealing with wild animals helped me stay composed. Finally, through persistence and luck, I managed to make the lion retreat. It gave me one last angry look before returning to its cubs. I staggered back, my heart pounding and the fear still clinging to me. I quickly left the area, feeling the rain starting to lighten. Although I had escaped the dangerous situation, the images and sensations of that encounter lingered in my mind. It was a lifelong lesson in respecting and being vigilant in the wild that I will never forget. Throughout the encounter, my mental state fluctuated between panic and the calmness forged through years of experience. The initial fear upon realizing the real danger, combined with survival instincts and ranger expertise, allowed me to act effectively to protect myself. Those tense moments are etched deeply in my memory, reminding me of the fragility of humans in the face of nature and the importance of always being prepared for unexpected situations. This story is not only a terrifying experience, but also a valuable lesson in human interaction with wildlife. Each day in the forest brings challenges and potential dangers, but also helps us understand more about the natural world and our place within it. My name is David Miller, a forest ranger who has been working in this national forest for over 10 years. My duties include patrolling, monitoring activities in the forest, and ensuring that poachers or illegal loggers do not destroy our precious resources. Every day is filled with tasks and responsibilities, but tonight, as the rain pours heavily, I feel like I can take a little rest. Tonight, the sound of rain falling on the roof of the watchtower is like a lullaby, quickly lulling me into a deep sleep. The pitter-patter of rain blends with the rustling of leaves, creating a peaceful and soothing atmosphere. In the quiet of the night forest, it feels like all worries and fatigue have vanished. Rainy nights like this always bring me a special sense of relaxation. I sit in my chair, my eyes slowly closing, my soul relaxing, fully immersing myself in the tranquility of nature. The steady rhythm of the rain reminds me of the peace and natural order of life in the forest. Suddenly, a loud noise shattered the quiet night, jolting me awake with a pounding heart. I blinked a few times, trying to become fully aware. Even though I was still very sleepy, I knew I couldn't ignore this noise. A feeling of unease rose within me, and I immediately stood up, gripping my flashlight and an old but still reliable pistol. The noise came from the east, where the forest is dense and rarely visited. I opened the door of the station, stepping out into the pouring rain. The flashlight in my hand illuminated each step, but the heavy rain significantly limited my visibility. As I approached the area where the noise came from, I noticed a flickering light in the forest. My steps slowed as I carefully advanced. Through the thick rain, I saw a group of people hurriedly chopping down trees. They were not ordinary people, but loggers, armed with weapons. I hid behind a large tree, my hands trembling as I tried to radio the local police. But before I could say anything, another logger spotted me. He shouted, and I knew I didn't have time to escape easily. I ran into the forest, the sound of rain and the footsteps of my pursuer merging in the dark. The heavy rain made the ground slippery. I tried to keep my balance, but unfortunately slipped and rolled down a slope. Everything spun and went black before my eyes. When I woke up, my body was lying motionless on the wet ground. The rain continued to fall, cold drops of water running down my face. I tried to move, but realized my leg was dislocated or broken. Pain spread throughout my body, but I knew I had to find a way to escape. I looked around, trying to determine my location in the darkness. There was no sign of the loggers, but I couldn't be sure if they had left or were still searching for me. I had to remain silent and cautious. Using my hands, I dragged my body toward a large tree for temporary shelter. The rain seemed endless, each drop wanting to drown me in despair. But I couldn't give up. I took out my phone, knowing that the signal in the forest was very weak. I sent a distress message to my colleagues, hoping the signal would be strong enough to get through. While waiting, I told myself to stay calm. Every minute felt like an hour, and time seemed to stand still in the cold rain. Tonight would be a long night, and I didn't know what awaited me ahead, but I knew I had to survive, had to overcome this challenge to return safely. The rain kept falling, but I wouldn't let it extinguish my will and hope. The rain kept falling, each cold drop penetrating my clothes, seeping into my skin, making me shiver. I tried to stay calm, breathing steadily, thinking of ways to get out of this perilous situation. My leg hurt intensely, every movement making me groan in helplessness. But I had no other choice. I had to save myself. I checked my phone, hoping for a signal, but the screen only showed a weak single bar. The distress message hadn't been sent. I knew I needed to move to a higher position to catch a signal, but how to move with such a severely injured leg? Using my hands, I dragged my body across the wet ground, trying not to leave too obvious traces. Each pull increased the pain, but the will to survive urged me on. I looked around, trying to orient myself. In the dense darkness and pouring rain, everything became jumbled and hard to recognize. I remembered a large rock nearby where I often rested during patrols. If I could reach it, I might be able to climb up and send the distress message. I focused all my strength, using my hands to pull myself in that direction. Each time I paused to breathe, I listened to the sounds around me. The rain created a constant noise, but occasionally I heard distant footsteps. The loggers were probably still searching for me. I had to be more careful. When I reached the rock, the rain seemed to get heavier. I took a deep breath, using my hands to grasp the rock's edge, and tried to climb up. The pain in my leg made me lose balance, but finally I managed to get on top of the rock. I held my phone up high, hoping to catch a signal. Finally, a single bar appeared. I quickly sent the distress message along with my GPS coordinates. After the message was sent, I felt slightly relieved. Now, I just needed to wait for help. But the night wasn't done with me yet. While I sat on the rock, eyes staring into the rain, I saw a flashlight flickering in the forest. The loggers were getting closer. I knew I had to find a way to hide, but in my current state, moving was extremely difficult. I decided to hide behind the rock, trying to make myself invisible in the darkness. The footsteps and voices of the loggers grew clearer. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't find me. One of the loggers approached the rock, his flashlight sweeping over my hiding spot. My heart pounded, every muscle in my body tensed. He paused for a moment, seemingly listening for something, then moved on. I breathed a sigh of relief, but I knew I couldn't hide forever. I needed a plan. I had to find a way to move to a safer location where my colleagues could find me easily. I calmed myself, thinking of the shortest path to a higher point in the forest. I decided to move when the rain lightened. While waiting, I held tightly to my flashlight and pistol, prepared for the worst. Despite the pain and exhaustion, I knew I had to be strong, couldn't give up. The night was long and cold, but the hope of survival and the help from my colleagues kept me going. The rain seemed relentless, but my spirit wasn't dampened. I was determined to survive, to get through this terrifying night, to return safely. The night seemed endless, every second stretching out like a battle with myself. The rain kept pouring, cold and relentless, but I wouldn't let it dim my determination. I knew my colleagues would come, but I had to keep myself safe until they arrived. While waiting, I decided to check the condition of my leg. I tried to remove my shoe and examine the injured area. Despite the pain, I found that my leg wasn't broken, just dislocated and swollen. This at least gave me some hope that I could move carefully. I temporarily bandaged my leg with the first aid kit in my bag. The task wasn't easy, with my trembling hands and the rain constantly pelting down, but eventually I managed. The pain subsided slightly, and I felt I could try to move slowly. The loggers seemed to have dispersed. Their footsteps and voices were no longer nearby. This was my best chance to move to a higher position. I recalled a small hill nearby where I could easily observe the surroundings and get a better phone signal. I carefully moved, step by step, though each step was painful. The rain continued, but it seemed lighter. Darkness enveloped everything, with only the weak light from my flashlight guiding me. Every time I paused to breathe, I listened intently, ensuring no one was following me. As I neared the small hill, I felt my strength waning, but the hope of rescue spurred me on. Finally, I reached the top of the small hill. From here, I could see more clearly in the night and sense a stronger phone signal. I checked my phone and saw that the distress message had been received. I sent another message to confirm my current location and injury status. Then I sat back against a rock, eyes closed, trying to stay warm and rest. Time passed slowly, each second feeling like an eternity. The pain and fatigue made me want to sleep, but I had to stay alert. Suddenly, I heard a strange sound, soft but clear footsteps in the dark. My heart raced, my hand gripping the pistol tightly. I pointed the flashlight towards the sound, eyes straining to see in the darkness. The beam of the flashlight illuminated a figure approaching. I sighed in relief when I recognized my colleague in the familiar ranger uniform. He quickly approached, eyes filled with concern. "David, are you okay?" he asked, his voice mixed with the rain. "My leg is dislocated, but I'm okay," I replied, feeling more secure with my colleague beside me. "The loggers are somewhere nearby. They have weapons." He nodded, his expression serious. "We got your message. The rescue team is on their way. We'll hold this position until they arrive." I felt relieved, knowing help was on the way. Despite the harrowing night, I had survived thanks to my determination and courage. The hope from my colleagues and the rescue team's assistance gave me confidence that I would be safe. The rain gradually ceased, giving way to the rising dawn. The first rays of sunlight pierced through the leaves, bringing warmth and new hope. I knew I had survived the long night and was ready to face the challenges ahead. The first light of dawn began to filter through the leaves, bringing warmth and new hope. I sat back against the rock, feeling the warmth gradually spread through my wet clothes. My colleagues stayed close, keeping spirits high and watching over the surroundings. We knew the rescue team was on its way, and it was only a matter of time. Soon, the sound of engines echoed from afar, blending with the remaining drizzle. The bright headlights of the local police patrol cars gradually came into view. I felt a sense of relief as I saw the rescue team and fellow rangers approaching. "You arrived just in time," I said, my voice filled with gratitude as I saw the rescuers. They quickly came to check on me and properly bandaged my leg. Meanwhile, another group of police officers swiftly deployed a plan to capture the loggers. Thanks to my information, they had pinpointed the location and prepared for a surprise attack. We stayed back, watching our comrades head into the deep forest, determined to bring the culprits to justice. The sound of confrontation soon echoed through the forest. Shouts and gunshots pierced the misty air, but I trusted my colleagues' abilities. Time seemed to slow, every moment tense and suspenseful. Finally, the gunfire ceased, and the shouts stopped. The officers returned with the captured loggers in handcuffs. Their faces showed fear and surprise at being caught. I watched them, feeling a mix of pride and relief. One police officer approached us, nodding in thanks. "Thanks to your information, we've arrested the entire group of loggers. They will face justice." I smiled, feeling relieved and satisfied. "It's our duty. Thank you for coming in time." The rescue team quickly transported me to an ambulance for medical care. On the way out of the forest, I felt the peace returning. The rain had completely stopped, and the sky was clear, promising a bright new day. After receiving medical care at the hospital, I was brought home to rest. In the following days, I received many inquiries and encouragements from colleagues and loved ones. I knew I had overcome a great challenge, making me appreciate my work and life even more. The captured loggers would face justice, and I believed the forest would be more peaceful from now on. But above all, this experience reminded me of the importance of perseverance, courage, and the support of those around me. In the darkness and storm, there is always a light of hope to guide us home. As time passed, I gradually recovered and returned to my ranger duties. The forest where I worked had become more peaceful after the incident. The loggers were punished, and forest protection measures were tightened more than ever. I stood in the forest, breathing in the fresh air and listening to the birds chirping. A sense of peace and satisfaction filled me. The memories of that rainy night would always be a part of me, reminding me of the courage and determination to overcome difficulties. And no matter what challenges lie ahead, I knew I would always be ready to face them with determination and belief in what I was protecting. The forest would always be home, where I find peace and strength. End of Story 3. The Rainy Diaries channel invites you to stay tuned for Story 4. The Rangers. What is the creepiest forest story you have ever encountered in the woods? There was a time when I worked as a ranger in a wild reserve. Throughout my job, I had to coordinate quite a bit with other rangers. Most of the time, we would patrol designated areas, removing all kinds of unauthorized cameras, animal traps, and such. Each shift usually consisted of just 2 people, me and another ranger. One day, while we were on patrol, my colleague said he felt unwell. We took a break, but he didn't feel much better, so I decided to continue the patrol on my own and let him head back early. I let him go because it would take nearly an hour of off-road driving to get back to the headquarters from where we were. While I was busy clearing traps and cameras, suddenly a voice came from somewhere around me. A raspy, deep voice. Where I was standing was far from any trail, surrounded by trees on all sides, making it difficult to determine where the voice was coming from. I tried calling out loudly and seriously, asking if there was anyone nearby, but there was no response. It felt like I was hallucinating and Mother Nature was trying to mess with me. At this point, it was getting dusk, so I decided to ignore it and headed towards my off-road vehicle to prepare to head back. But when I got into my vehicle and pressed the start button, there was no response. This is when I started to panic. Alone in the vast forest, my vehicle wouldn't start, and the nearest trail was 3 kilometers away. It sounded like the plot of a suspenseful movie. Then I calmed myself down and tried to figure out what was wrong with the vehicle. After a while, I noticed that the cable from the battery to the vehicle had been disconnected. I tried not to think about how the cable got disconnected or who might have done it. I just wanted to fix it quickly and get out of that creepy place. So I grabbed the cable and reconnected it to the battery terminal and tried starting the vehicle again. To my surprise, the vehicle started, but it didn't feel like it was running smoothly at all. Sure enough, after driving less than a kilometer, it died again with no power or engine. Luckily, I had gotten out of the no signal area, and where I was now, I could use the radio again. I turned it on, reported back to headquarters, and requested urgent assistance. In no time, I got a response from my colleagues at headquarters, but they said it would take nearly an hour for them to reach my location. At this point, I remembered that my colleague had gone back to the headquarters earlier. I asked my colleagues at headquarters if he had returned yet, but they said they hadn't seen him at all. Strange. The sky turned pitch black, and it started to drizzle. While waiting for my colleagues to come to my aid, I lit a small fire to ward off the cold and gloom of the forest. Once again, I heard voices around me. The trees in this area were still very dense, making it extremely difficult to pinpoint where the sound was coming from. But this time, the voices were different. I sat and listened, realizing that there were more than one voice. It sounded like 2 people arguing very heatedly. One sounded very angry, yelling at the other, who sounded scared and trembling. I shouted, "What's going on? Does anyone need help?" But again, there was no response. I guessed both people were within 300 meters of my location. At this point, I started to get really scared. I grabbed the radio and asked again why my colleagues hadn't arrived yet. They said they were still trying to determine my exact location and it would take a bit more time to reach me. I told them to ask the colleague who had been with me earlier since he had a tablet with a map inside. But their answer made me even more confused. He hasn't returned yet? A while later, I heard the voices again. This time, I decided to figure out if it was some pranksters around. I followed the direction where I felt the voices were coming from, but the further I went, the further the voices seemed to move away from me. The more I walked, the more it felt like I was chasing something meaningless, like chasing a past love. After about 20 minutes of this cat and mouse game, I decided to give up and head back to the fire I had lit earlier to warm up. Just as I sat down, I received a radio call from my colleagues at headquarters. They said they had found my earlier colleague, the one who had left early due to feeling unwell. He was found unconscious, covered in vomit, looking like he had been through something extremely terrifying. They immediately took him to the hospital, and now they were starting to locate me. I was listening and getting ready to provide them more details about my location when suddenly the radio went dead. Finally, it had run out of battery, and then once again the voices started around me. This time I decided not to do anything, just sit and try to listen to the content of the conversation between the voices. I could make out some phrases like, "Hey, that's not yours to take. I don't care. Come on, don't do this. I know you're better than that." Then there was a series of threats, and the tension in the conversation escalated. Then suddenly everything went silent, a silence that lasted for 3 to 4 minutes. And then there was a gunshot. Immediately, I put out my fire and rushed to find a place to hide in the bushes. Again, the silence covered everything around. No rustling or crackling of the fire. Only my heavy breathing and, after a long while, the sound of off-road vehicles. I heard the sound of my colleagues' vehicles and felt overwhelming joy. I left my vehicle there, and a colleague gave me a ride back to headquarters. There, I recounted everything I had experienced, and we decided that the next day we would request police assistance along with police dogs. The next day, a whole police force went with us to patrol and investigate the gunshot from the previous night. After about an hour of searching, we found a shallow, crude grave, looking like someone had hastily tried to cover up a crime. Inside was the body of a man, and even from a glance, it was clear he had been shot in the chest. The strange thing was, the body was just bones, and it was evident he had died several years ago. There were 2 theories we proposed. 1, the gunshot I heard the day before came from somewhere else we hadn't found. Or 2, I accidentally heard someone telling me about a murder that had happened a long time ago. The dark shadow in the ancient forest. My name is John Harrison. I have been a ranger at Yosemite National Park for 10 years. My job is not only to protect the forest, but also to immerse myself in nature, listening to the sounds of the mountains and ensuring the safety of visitors. That day started like any other, with a radiant sunrise and sunlight filtering through the canopy, creating a beautiful picture. Every morning, I would take time to patrol the forest, breathing in the fresh air and listening to the birds singing. The early morning rays pierced through the thin mist, illuminating the dewdrops on the leaves, creating sparkling beams of light. This scene always made me feel peaceful and serene, as if all the worries and stresses of life had melted away. I love my job. Each day brings new experiences and exciting discoveries about nature and wildlife. Sometimes I encounter deer grazing, squirrels hopping from branch to branch, or eagles soaring in the clear blue sky. Each of these moments is a precious gift from nature. The work of a ranger is not always easy, but these moments of merging with nature make all the hardships worthwhile. I always feel fortunate to work in such a beautiful and tranquil place as Yosemite. That day, I was on patrol when the sky suddenly darkened and rain began to pour down. The rain came quickly and heavily, making the air cooler and fresher. Raindrops fell rhythmically on the leaves, creating a natural symphony. I decided to hurry back to the ranger station, which was about 1 kilometer away. The familiar forest path became slippery and difficult to navigate. The rain softened the ground, making each step heavier. I tried to walk carefully, avoiding rocks and protruding roots. However, one misstep caused me to slip and fall. My knee struck a rock hard, and pain radiated through my leg. I tried to get up, but found that my leg couldn't bear my weight. My radio had been damaged in the fall and wasn't working. I tried to call for my colleagues, but it was useless. The rain grew heavier, and I had to find temporary shelter. Looking around, I saw a dense canopy of leaves and decided to crawl toward it to avoid the rain. Under the tree, I felt the tranquility of the ancient forest envelop me. The steady sound of rain on the leaves created a gentle, natural melody. Despite the pain and worry, I could still appreciate the serene beauty of the forest. But in that stillness, I began to sense something amiss. A strange noise echoed from afar, like heavy footsteps on wet ground. I strained my ears, trying to pinpoint the source of the sound. In that moment, I suddenly noticed a dark shadow moving in my line of sight. It wasn't the shadow of trees or ordinary animals. It was tall, hairy, and seemed to be observing me. I tried to look closer, but the shadow vanished into the darkness of the dense forest before I could comprehend what was happening. My heart pounded. and I couldn't believe my eyes. Was this a mystical creature that folklore had spoken of? Or was it just a hallucination caused by pain and fatigue? The rain continued unabated, and I felt fear creeping into my mind. I didn't dare move further, just sat still under the tree and listened. The strange noises persisted, and I knew I couldn't stay here much longer. But with my injured leg, returning to the station on my own was impossible. I tried the radio again, hoping to contact my colleagues, but it was still silent. In that moment, I saw the dark shadow once more. This time it was closer, clearer. It stood still as if observing my every move. I tried to remain calm, pulling out my phone to call for help. But when I looked at the screen, there was no signal. With no other options, I had to wait in anxiety and fear. Time passed slowly. The rain continued and the shadow had completely disappeared. But I knew it was still there, in the darkness, watching me. I felt trapped between the real world and the supernatural, between life and death. Suddenly, a loud noise came from behind me. I turned around but saw nothing but darkness. I began to feel as though I was being hunted. These mystical creatures could move quickly and disappear into the shadows, leaving me unsure of where they were or when they would reappear. As I was in a state of panic, a light flashed in the distance. It was the flashlight of my colleagues, who had noticed my absence and were searching for me. I felt a wave of relief and began to shout, hoping they could hear me. My colleagues finally arrived and helped me stand. They carefully examined my leg and assisted me back to the station. On the way back, I recounted what I had seen, but no one believed me. They said it was just a hallucination caused by pain and fatigue. But I knew what I had seen. That giant dark shadow was not a product of my imagination. It was a living creature in the ancient forest, an unsolved mystery. My story ends here, but I know I will never forget what I experienced. The ancient forest always holds mysteries and dangers that humans have yet to fully understand. And I, a ranger with 10 years of experience, have learned never to underestimate the power of nature and its hidden secrets. A Horrifying Memory. My name is Hiroshi Saito, a ranger with over 10 years of experience working in various forests across Japan. My job usually involves protecting nature, rescuing lost people, and sometimes dealing with emergencies. But I never thought I would have the chance to work in Aokigahara Forest, known as the Suicide Forest. It's a place where even the locals hesitate to enter unless they have an extremely specific reason. Aokigahara lies at the base of Mount Fuji, a land formed by cooled lava flows. The ground here is hard and uneven, covered with a dense layer of vegetation and tangled vines. This forest is infamous for its eerie and mysterious tales, from people disappearing without a trace to wandering spirits of those who committed suicide. Patrolling this area is no small challenge, even for someone as experienced as I am. On my first night assigned to patrol the area, the sky was pitch black, with only the weak moonlight filtering through the thick canopy. I wore my thick ranger coat, hard hat, and carried a strong flashlight, bracing myself for whatever might come. The air was biting cold, and a heavy atmosphere made me feel uneasy. Every step I took made a faint rustling sound, creating eerie echoes in the strangely silent space. As I entered the forest, the first feeling that struck me was isolation. The sounds of the city, everyday noises, all vanished, leaving only an absolute stillness, occasionally broken by the wind rustling through the trees. The ground beneath my feet was damp and slippery, with large roots rising like invisible traps. The air here was thick and heavy, as if holding the darkest secrets. I moved slowly along the trails, my eyes scanning for any movement. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. Light footsteps, but clear in the silent forest. Turning around, I saw nothing. Maybe it was just a wild animal, I reassured myself. However, the sense of unease lingered in my mind. Continuing deeper into the forest, I gradually felt its mysteriousness. The towering ancient trees, the dense foliage casting dark shadows. Sometimes I saw ribbons tied to branches, signs of those who had ventured into the forest and never returned. Some people tied these ribbons to mark their path, hoping to find their way out. But many ribbons ended in vain, disappearing into the forest's darkness. Suddenly, the footsteps echoed again, clearer and closer this time. I turned once more, still seeing no one. My heart started to race, feeling a chill down my spine. I decided to quickly complete my task and leave this area. Despite my thorough training and experience, the forest's mystery and haunting atmosphere made me uneasy. When I reached an area known for its high number of suicides, I saw a small tent. Quietly approaching, I called out, "Is anyone inside? I'm a ranger here to help." No response. I lifted the tent flap, finding it empty except for an old notebook on the ground. Opening it, I read faint handwritten notes describing a young person's despair and sorrow. The lines were fragmented, but the emotions were clear in each stroke. Suddenly, a faint crying sound came from behind me. It sounded like a young girl. I turned around but saw no one. My heart pounded, panic setting in. The crying continued, leading me deeper into the forest. I tried to stay calm, but the closer I got, the louder and nearer the crying became. Finally, I saw a blurry figure of a young girl standing under an ancient tree. She wore a white kimono, her long hair covering her face. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" I asked, my voice trembling. The girl didn't respond, just stood there, the crying still echoing. I moved closer, but in an instant she vanished. Terrified, I stood rooted to the spot, my mind in turmoil between reality and illusion. I couldn't believe my eyes, but what I had just experienced was too vivid to be a figment of my imagination. My heart pounded wildly, like it wanted to burst out of my chest. The rustling sounds of the nighttime forest became more terrifying, as if invisible spirits were watching my every move. In that moment, I realized I was facing a force not of this world. A primal fear gripped me, my survival instincts kicking in. I decided to leave immediately. Running without thinking, my only goal was to escape the forest. As I ran, strange noises echoed behind me, as if someone was chasing. Each step seemed to stretch infinitely in the darkness. Images of the girl in the white kimono haunted my mind, an unshakable nightmare. Cold sweat dripped from my forehead, my body paralyzed with fear. Finally, when my flashlight began to illuminate familiar signs of the forest's exit, a wave of relief washed over me. But even outside the forest, the haunting fear remained. What I experienced that night was not just an encounter, but an indelible mark on my mind. I will never forget the despair in the girl's eyes, the haunting cries, and her mysterious disappearance. Those terrifying and mysterious experiences always remind me of the forest's danger and mystery. Since that night, I never patrol Aokigahara alone again. The stories and rumors about this forest are not just myths, but truly horrifying and unforgettable experiences for anyone who dares to enter. End of Story 6, the Rainy Diaries channel invites you to stay tuned for Story 7. Nightmare in the Wilderness. I am David Miller, a forest ranger with over 20 years of experience at Black Forest National Park in Germany. I've spent many long nights in the woods, facing various dangers from nature, but there was one night that still haunts me to this day. On an autumn night in 2010, I received an emergency call from the ranger station. A group of tourists had gone missing after entering the forbidden part of the forest, where many chilling legends are often told. My mission was to find them and bring them back safely. I began my journey at dusk, carrying a flashlight, map, and gun. As I ventured deeper into the forest, the dim light of the sun faded away, and darkness enveloped everything. The sound of the wind rustling through the trees and the creaking of branches made me feel that something was off. About an hour later, I found traces of the tourists. Their footprints led me to an area dense with trees. Suddenly, I heard whispers like someone was talking, but I couldn't make out the words. I called out, "Is anyone there?" But only my own echo replied. Continuing deeper, I came across an old abandoned wooden cabin. The windows were shattered, the front door was ajar, and the inside was pitch black. My instincts told me something was wrong, but I couldn't abandon the tourists. I stepped inside. Inside, the air was cold and damp. The stench made me nauseous. I swept my flashlight around and saw strange signs. Symbols carved into the walls and scattered animal bones. The whispers grew louder, as if they were right beside my ear. I proceeded up the creaky wooden stairs to the second floor. As I approached the last door at the end of the hallway, it eerily opened by itself. Inside, I saw the tourists standing in a circle, their eyes wide open, empty, and soulless. Before I could react, a dark shadow emerged from the corner of the room. It had no clear shape, just a blurry figure with glowing red eyes. I tried to draw my gun, but my body felt frozen, unable to move. The shadow advanced towards me, whispering strange words I couldn't understand. My heart pounded, and cold sweat ran down my face. Suddenly, the tourist screamed in agony and collapsed to the floor, unconscious. The shadow vanished as if it had never existed. I quickly dragged each person out of that cursed cabin and called for rescue. When they arrived, all the tourists were unconscious but fortunately alive. We never spoke of that night again, but I knew what I had witnessed. Since then, I never dared to return to the Forbidden Forest. The horrific memories and whispers haunt me every night, reminding me that there are secrets in the deep woods that humans should never uncover. Ghost Tiger of Sundarbans. My name is Arun, a young forest ranger in the Sundarbans mangrove forest, India. My job is to protect the forest and its wildlife, especially the rare Bengal tiger. Sundarbans is a place full of mysterious stories and legends, but I always believed in science and reason, until one night, all those beliefs were frighteningly shaken. That evening, my colleague Rajesh and I were assigned to patrol the northern part of the Sundarbans. This area had recently seen several reports of a strange tiger, more aggressive than usual, and capable of appearing and disappearing mysteriously. We prepared thoroughly, carrying strong flashlights, guns, and communication radios. The night was pitch black as we ventured deeper into the forest. The Sundarbans at night are truly enigmatic, with the sounds of insects chirping and leaves rustling underfoot. The thick darkness surrounded us, making the weak light from our flashlights almost useless. About an hour into our patrol, we heard a strange noise, like a growl from the depths of hell. Rajesh and I looked at each other, the worry evident in our eyes. We moved toward the sound, gripping our guns tightly. As we approached, I saw a pair of bright red eyes in the darkness. It was a tiger, large and ferocious. But what terrified me more was its appearance. Its fur was torn and bloody, covered in wounds, yet it stood there, growling and staring at us. Its red eyes seemed filled with hatred and resentment. Rajesh shouted, "Arun, we need to back off." But just as he finished, the tiger charged at a terrifying speed. I fired a shot, but the tiger seemed unaffected. It continued advancing, its red eyes burning with rage. In a moment of desperation, I heard a loud shout from behind. It was the local villagers, coming to our aid. They carried large torches, and the light from the fire made the tiger pause. For a brief moment, it looked at us one last time before disappearing into the darkness, as if it had never been there. The villagers told us it was a ghost tiger, the spirit of tigers that had died unjustly, returning for revenge. They believed the tiger was possessed by the spirit of a hunter who had been killed in the forest many years ago. Though the story seemed mystical, I couldn't deny what I had witnessed. After that night, I often had nightmares about the glowing red eyes and the torn, bloody fur of the ghost tiger. I became more cautious while patrolling the Sundarbans, always on alert for any possible situation. The stories and legends of the Sundarbans, which I once deemed unrealistic, now became vivid and haunting. Once, I met a wildlife researcher from abroad. He was very interested in the mystical stories of the Sundarbans and asked me to recount my experience. As I told him, he listened intently, then thoughtfully said, "Such stories don't exist only here. Forests around the world hold mysteries that science has yet to explain." The story of the ghost tiger completely changed my perspective on my job and the forest I protect. While I still believe in science, I also began to respect the inexplicable, the mysteries of nature that we may never fully understand. Sundarbans is not just a wild place, but a world of mysteries and legends, where every step can lead to unexpected experiences. A month after that terrifying night, Rajesh and I continued our duties, though still haunted by the ghost tiger story. One night, while patrolling near the area where we had encountered the ghost tiger, I heard light but distinct footsteps in the dark. I signaled Rajesh to stop and listen. The footsteps seemed to come from all directions, as if many creatures were moving around us. My heart raced, the fear returning. I turned on my flashlight and swept it through the dense bushes. In the dim light, I glimpsed a large shadow darting past. "Rajesh, be careful," I shouted. But before we could react, a tiger appeared before us. But this time it didn't look like the ghost tiger we had seen. It was a regular Bengal tiger, but it seemed highly agitated. It growled and looked at us with wild eyes. Rajesh quickly fired a shot into the air, trying to scare it away. The tiger hesitated for a moment, then retreated into the deep forest. We sighed in relief, but couldn't forget the fear and helplessness we felt facing nature's power. After that night, I decided to learn more about the ghost tiger story. I met with many locals, listening to the stories and legends they recounted. One of the most notable stories was about a hunter named Vijay, who had died mysteriously in the Sundarbans many years ago. According to the tale, Vijay was a skilled hunter who liked to hunt tigers for their fur and bones. One night, while hunting, he was attacked by a large tiger. The battle was fierce, and in the end, both Vijay and the tiger died. The villagers believed that Vijay's spirit possessed the tiger, turning it into a ghost tiger, always appearing to take revenge on those who dared to enter the forest. These stories made me think a lot. As a forest ranger, I understood that our job was not just to protect animals in the forest, but also to respect the mystical and legendary beliefs of the locals. I began to approach everything more carefully, not only relying on scientific knowledge, but also listening to and respecting the experiences and beliefs of the people. One night, while patrolling alone, I again heard growling and strange footsteps in the forest. This time, I didn't panic, but calmly stood still, listening. The sounds came closer, and I saw a pair of red eyes in the darkness. I didn't hold my gun, didn't turn on my flashlight, just stood there and waited. The tiger approached, its eyes no longer filled with rage. It stood there, looking at me for a moment, then quietly turned away, disappearing into the darkness. I felt a sense of unity between man and nature, a mutual respect and understanding. Since that night, I no longer feared the mystical stories of the Sundarbans. I understood that the forest always holds wonders and mysteries that we may never fully understand. My job is not just to protect the forest and wildlife, but also to respect and protect the legends and beliefs of the local people. The ghost tiger may just be a mystical story, but to me, it symbolizes the wonder and mystery of nature. Sundarbans is not just where I work, but where I've learned much about life, respect, and things that cannot be explained by science. The Whispering Shadows of Eldridge Forest. My name is Mark Johnson, a ranger at Eldridge National Forest. That night, it was pouring rain, and I was on duty in a small cabin in the middle of the woods. The sound of rain pattering on the cabin roof, combined with the wind rustling through the leaves, created a soothing lo-fi melody. I sat there, listening to the rain as if it were a relaxing tune, feeling a sense of peace amidst the wilderness. I boiled water to make coffee, the warmth from the cup spreading through my hands and adding to the comfort. But that peace didn't last long. Suddenly, a loud noise echoed from deep within the forest, breaking the silence. It sounded like a large tree crashing to the ground, forceful and abrupt. From my experience, it could be loggers trying to fell trees during the rainy night, thinking the bad weather would keep them from being detected. I donned my raincoat, grabbed my flashlight and rifle, and stepped outside. The heavy rain limited visibility, and the flashlight only illuminated a small area ahead. Carefully, I ventured deeper into the forest, the sound reoccurring, this time clearer, like a tree falling or something very heavy being pushed. Following the noise, I felt each step sink into the mud, growing heavier with anxiety. After about 15 minutes, I reached a clearing where I was sure the noise had come from. Strangely, there were no signs of any logging activity. The trees stood tall, undisturbed. An eerie silence enveloped the area, with only the steady rain breaking the quiet. I began to feel something was wrong, a chill that wasn't from the rain. Suddenly heard a very soft sigh, like the wind but filled with an eerie quality. Turning around, my flashlight revealed a shadowy figure in the rain. It wasn't a person, but a blurry silhouette, indistinct. I felt a cold sensation, as if eyes were staring intently at me. Focusing the flashlight, the shadow remained there, motionless and chilling. I approached cautiously and discovered it was an ancient tree, its trunk marked with strange symbols and old scars. On closer inspection, I recognized the symbols from old documents about ancient native rituals. My heart began to race, anxiety rising. These rituals often involved summoning spirits or worshiping mystical entities in the forest. As I examined the symbols, a strong gust of wind rustled the leaves, but the rustling sounded like eerie whispers. Startled, I turned around, and the flashlight illuminated a sight that made me shiver. In the distance, a group of shadowy figures was moving, as if a mysterious ritual was taking place. Realizing I had stumbled upon a sacred area, I backed away, understanding that the figures were spirits performing an ancient ritual. Fear surged through me, and I tried to stay calm, retreating slowly. Just as I turned to flee, a loud scream echoed, not from behind, but inside my head, as if someone was warning me of imminent danger. I sprinted back to the cabin, filled with anxiety and fear. The shadowy figures haunted my mind, and the eerie scream echoed like an unending nightmare. Back in the cabin, I shut the door and sat down, trying to calm myself. The rain continued to pour, but the peace of its sound was gone. The next morning, I recounted the incident to a colleague named John, who had worked there for years. Hearing about the symbols and ancient rituals, his face turned pale. John told me about an old legend among the natives saying this area was once used for mystical rituals to protect the forest and summon guardian spirits. John explained that I might have disturbed the guardian spirits and their ritual. This sent chills down my spine. Since then, I always avoided that area during night patrols and remained more cautious than ever. I couldn't forget the eerie feeling of that rainy night and constantly reminded myself to respect the mysterious and sacred elements of Eldridge Forest. End of Story 9. The Rainy Diaries channel invites you to stay tuned for Story 10. The Haunting Voices in the Deep Forest. My name is Michael, a forest ranger responsible for protecting the National Forest. My daily job involves patrolling and ensuring no one trespasses or illegally logs the forest. That night, it was pouring rain, and the heavy raindrops fell on my car roof, creating a steady, heavy sound. I received a report from the ranger station about strange noises coming from deep within the forest. With a sense of worry and duty, I drove to the location, the car's headlights cutting through the darkness and rain, casting weak beams of light on the muddy dirt road. When I arrived, I grabbed my rifle from the back seat, checked the bullets, and stepped out of the car. Darkness enveloped everything, and the sound of the rain made the atmosphere even more eerie. I carefully advanced into the forest, each step filled with extreme tension. The strange noises persisted, sounding like eerie groans, unlike any animal I had ever heard. As I got closer, I began to see strange footprints deeply embedded in the wet ground. Large footprints, unlike those of humans or forest animals. My heart pounded harder as I tried to stay calm and continued deeper into the forest. The flashlight beam created dancing shadows among the towering trees. Suddenly, I heard a heavy breath behind me. I turned around, seeing nothing but darkness and falling rain. The breath didn't belong to any human, but seemed to come from something much larger. Continuing forward, I arrived at a clearing where the noises were more pronounced. In front of me was a horrifying sight. A towering creature, its skin wrinkled and wet as if it had just emerged from the ground. Its eyes glowed in the darkness, with a deep, hateful stare. It resembled no animal I had ever seen, and its presence sent chills down my spine. I raised my rifle, hands trembling. The creature moved closer, its breath mingling with the sound of the rain, creating an eerie symphony. I fired a warning shot, but it didn't seem to deter the creature. I stepped back, heart racing, sweat drenching my back. As the creature advanced, I remembered the emergency whistle I carried. Quickly, I pulled it out and blew as hard as I could. The piercing sound echoed through the night, startling the creature. It roared, an unnerving, angry sound, and then turned and fled into the dark depths of the forest. I collapsed to the ground, panting, hands still shaking. When I looked up, the creature had vanished, leaving only its deep footprints in the mud. After regaining my composure, I hurried back to the ranger station. Telling my colleagues about the encounter, none of them believed me. They thought I was hallucinating due to fatigue and job stress, but I knew what I had seen, and the fear continued to haunt me. Since that night, I have been much more cautious during my patrols. Every time it rains, I can't help but recall that terrifying night. The eerie voices, the heavy breaths, and those glowing eyes in the darkness still haunt me whenever I venture into the deep forest. Will-o'-the-Wisp in Ouachita National Forest. My name is David Miller, and I've worked as a ranger at Ouachita National Forest in Arkansas for many years. My job involves protecting and maintaining this vast forest, ensuring the safety of both people and wildlife. I've always loved my work, finding peace in the natural world, but I've also known it holds many mysteries yet to be uncovered. One rainy night forever changed how I view my job and this forest. That night, it was pouring rain. Heavy raindrops pounded on my hat and coat, creating a steady yet haunting sound in the darkness. The cold rain made the air around me misty, and the beam from my flashlight barely pierced the short distance ahead. Everything around was shrouded in darkness, and every step I took made a squelching sound on the soaked ground. I was patrolling through a dense part of the forest when suddenly a faint light appeared ahead. At first, I thought it was just the rain reflecting off the leaves, but the light became clearer. It was a pale blue glow, hovering among the tall trees. A chill ran down my spine as I realized this light didn't follow any natural laws. My heart started to race, and my breathing became labored. I moved closer, trying to stay calm but unable to shake the creeping fear. The light moved slowly, almost deliberately. It wasn't the beam of a flashlight or the headlights of a vehicle, but something different, eerie and otherworldly. I wondered if I was hallucinating, but the light was undeniably real, leading me deeper into the forest. The fear didn't just come from not knowing what the light was, but from the presence of something unseen. As I continued towards the light, it felt like someone was watching me, making me feel like prey being hunted. Every step felt heavy, and every small sound in the forest startled me. When I was only a few meters away from the light, it vanished right before my eyes. I stood there in the darkness, feeling as though everything around me had stopped. There was no trace of the light, no other sounds except the rain. A strange sensation washed over me, as if I had just experienced something inexplicable. Panic began to spread, paralyzing any logical thoughts. For a moment, I didn't know what to do. I felt trapped in a strange world where anything could happen. I tried to reassure myself that it was just some natural phenomenon, but deep down, I knew something was off. The fear and helplessness made me feel like I was sinking into a nightmare with no escape. I returned to that area many times afterward, both during the day and at night, but never saw the will-o'-the-wisp again. Other rangers had also reported similar occurrences, but no one could explain their origin. It remains a mystery of Ouachita National Forest, one of many things we cannot fully understand. In the nights following that incident, I often had nightmares about the ghostly light. In my dreams, I would find myself lost in the forest, chasing the blue glow, but never getting closer. The panic and helplessness followed me, even after waking up. The fear had ingrained itself deeply, making me wary whenever I patrolled at night. Since that night, every time I go on patrol during rainy, dark nights, I remember that eerie will-o'-the-wisp. It serves as a reminder that no matter how much we know about nature, there are still many mysteries we have yet to uncover. And sometimes, the strangest things happen when we least expect them. The will-o'-the-wisp is not just a strange phenomenon, but a symbol of an invisible fear we cannot control. It made me realize that no matter how strong and brave we are, there are things in life we can't understand or deal with. This was the most valuable lesson I learned from that night. A lesson about the insignificance of humans before nature and its mysteries. The fear from that night didn't just remain in my dreams or nighttime patrols. It influenced how I viewed life and my job. I started to research more about strange occurrences in the forest, listening to stories from other rangers and reading about similar events. Although I couldn't find satisfactory answers, I felt I had a better understanding of the complexity and mystery of nature. Every time I recall that night, I feel a chill, as if the will-o'-the-wisp still lurks somewhere in the forest. It's a reminder that no matter how confident we are in our abilities, nature always holds things we can't control. And that's what makes the job of a ranger special and challenging. In subsequent patrols, I always carry with me a sense of caution and respect for nature. I know that, despite my years of experience, there are many things I don't know and don't fully understand. And that's what makes me feel like a student before the greatness and mystery of nature. That will-o'-the-wisp changed my life and work, making me realize that the smallness of humans before nature is inevitable. But at the same time, it made me appreciate my job even more. A job that helps me explore and protect the wonders and mysteries of the forest. And though the fear from that night still haunts me, I know it's an essential part of this journey.